accidentally sent a secret letter to the Alpha King. Now he's at her door at 3 a.m. Outside, the night was heavy and still, the cold wind whispering through the cracks of her old manor. She had always liked these quiet nights, the kind when the world seemed paused, waiting for something extraordinary to happen. Tonight, however, she did not feel peace. Tonight she felt nerves twisting in her stomach. Her hands trembled slightly as she folded the delicate parchment. It was just a letter, she told herself. Just a letter meant for her closest friend, someone who knew her deepest thoughts. Nothing dangerous. Nothing that could ever reach the eyes of someone like King Kale. Arya's pulse quickened. She had spent hours writing, her pen carrying words she had never dared speak aloud. Thoughts about the unfairness of power, the way the kingdom favored alphas, the secret dreams she had long kept buried, and her private curiosity about the king himself. How he commanded attention, how his presence could silence a room, and the strange feeling she could not explain whenever she thought of him. She folded the letter neatly, sealing it with wax. Her hand lingered on the cool metal of the seal, as if she could will her thoughts back inside her mind. But then a small, almost invisible slip of paper had gone missing. She frowned, searching the desk. In a heartbeat of horror, she realized what had happened. The letter, the one meant for her friend, had been placed in the wrong envelope, and that wrong envelope was addressed to the king. Her stomach dropped. She could feel the panic rising, sharp and cold. The king, King Kale, the ruler of the entire realm. A man of strength, mystery, and fear. And now, through one careless mistake, he held her words in his hands. Arya's mind raced. No, no, this cannot be happening, she whispered to the empty room. She had always admired the king from afar, but admiration was a dangerous thing. He was distant, untouchable, and yet her words had crossed that impossible boundary. She could not undo it. The letter was gone, sent, delivered. Her heart thumped loudly in the silence. Every shadow seemed to stretch toward her. She tried to distract herself with busy work, tidying the small room, arranging the books on her shelf, but her hands moved like she was underwater. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like a drum announcing doom. Hours passed, and the night deepened. Arya tried to convince herself that perhaps the king would not take notice. Perhaps he was busy with state affairs, or perhaps he would simply ignore a minor letter from a small Omega living far from the palace. But the clock struck 3, and Arya's calm shattered. A sharp knock echoed through the manor, startling her so badly she nearly dropped the candle. Arya froze, her hand hovering in the air. The knock came again, slow, deliberate, commanding. Her mind felt like it was spinning. Only one person could be knocking like that at this hour. The Alpha King. Her legs trembled as she approached the door. She had no weapon, no plan, only the fear and hope that perhaps he had come by accident, that perhaps it was someone else. But the heavy footsteps that followed the knock told her otherwise. The moment she opened the door, her breath caught in her throat. Kale stood there, taller than any man she had ever seen, cloaked in black that seemed to absorb the moonlight. His eyes were sharp like polished obsidian, and they fixed on her with a quiet, consuming intensity. Arya felt her knees weaken. She wanted to say something, anything, but her voice had abandoned her. "You sent this," he said, his voice low and smooth, carrying the weight of authority. He held the letter in his hand, the wax seal broken, revealing her private thoughts. Arya's heart pounded against her ribs. You wrote it about me," he interrupted, taking a step closer. The air around him seemed to shift, as if the night itself leaned in to listen. "Tell me, Omega, did you mean these words?" The question felt like a blade, cutting through her fear and into her heart. She wanted to shrink away, hide from his gaze, but she could not. Some strange force kept her rooted, her hands trembling but refusing to move. I didn't mean for anyone to read it," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was private, for my friend." Kale's lips curved in a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "I see," He stepped fully into the room, his presence filling the space like a shadow made of silk and steel. Private, yes, but now it is mine to hold. And I am curious, Arya, very curious. Her stomach twisted. She hated herself for being both terrified and drawn to him. Every instinct screamed for her to run, yet something in the way he looked at her made her unable to move. Why are you here? She asked, trying to sound braver than she felt. Because, he said, moving closer, you wrote truths that few dare to speak aloud. And because you have awakened something in me. Arya's mind swirled. He spoke in riddles, but every word pressed against her chest like a heavy weight. The king, the most powerful man in the kingdom, was standing in her home, speaking of awakening something in him, something dangerous, something she could not name. Awakened, she echoed. I don't understand. Kale's eyes softened ever so slightly as if the weight of his crown and power pressed down even upon him. You will, little Omega. In time you will understand. But for now you must stay calm. Arya's pulse raced uncontrollably. She wanted to scream, to cry, to run, to beg him to leave. And yet, she could not. There was something in the quiet command of his presence, in the steady strength of his gaze, that rooted her to the spot. You must not panic, he said. His hand hovered near hers, not touching but close enough that the warmth of him seemed to reach into her bones. There are consequences for words like these, but also possibilities, dangerous possibilities. She swallowed hard. Consequences, she whispered. He nodded slowly. Yes, but first, you must explain to me why you wrote such things, every word. Arya's throat was dry. She had never spoken so openly to anyone, let alone the king. Yet here she was, faced with the impossible choice: lie and survive, or speak the truth and risk everything. I wanted to speak honestly, she said finally, her voice trembling but firm. I wanted to say what I felt, about the world, about you. Kale's expression did not change, yet his eyes seemed to darken with emotion she could not name. About me, he murmured, almost to himself. Then he looked back at her fully. You dared to write about me, and now you are here, trembling at my door, telling me the truth. The silence that followed was thick, almost suffocating. Arya could hear her own heartbeat echo in her ears. She had no idea what he would do next. Punish her, dismiss her, or something else entirely. Kale moved again, closer, his shadow falling over her like a cloak. You have caught my attention, Arya. That is dangerous for you. Her stomach dropped. Dangerous, he nodded slowly, and dangerous for me as well. Arya felt a strange thrill of fear mixed with something else, something she could not yet name. She wanted to run, but she could not. Her legs refused. Her mind refused. Even as the wind howled outside and the candle flickered, a silence settled between them, filled with unspoken questions, unspoken longings, and the faint hint of a bond forming against all reason. Tonight, Kale said, his voice low and commanding, you will not sleep alone. I will remain, not to frighten you but to understand and perhaps to protect you. Arya's chest tightened. She wanted to protest, to argue, but no words came. Only the truth of her racing heart, the warmth of his presence, and the impossible realization that her careless mistake had changed everything. Outside, the wind continued to whisper through the cracks of the manor, carrying with it the promise of danger, desire, and a night that would never be forgotten. And as Arya looked into the eyes of the Alpha King, she realized that nothing in her life would ever be the same again. Arya's hands shook as she stood frozen in the dim candlelight. King Kale's presence filled the room like a storm waiting to break. His dark eyes studied her, reading each movement, each hesitation, as if the letter had not only revealed her thoughts but unlocked some secret part of her that she herself did not fully understand. You must sit, Kale commanded softly, his voice firm but calm. He gestured to a high-backed chair near the fireplace. The flickering flames painted shadows across his face, making him look both terrifying and beautiful at the same time. Arya swallowed hard, but she obeyed. The wood of the chair was cold under her hands, but she forced herself to steady her breathing. She could feel the heat of his gaze like sunlight on bare skin, and her heart fluttered uncontrollably. "Do you understand why I am here?" Cale asked, his tone sharp but not angry. He moved to the window, pulling aside the heavy velvet drape to let in the silver light of the moon. "Arya, your words were bold, reckless even, and yet I feel I must hear them from your lips." Arya's throat went dry. Bold, reckless. She had thought of her letter as private musings, a quiet expression of her mind. But hearing the king say it aloud made her feel exposed, like a bird trapped in a cage. I just wanted to speak the truth," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I never meant for you to read it. It was only for a friend." Cale turned slowly, his eyes gleaming in the candlelight. He stepped closer, the shadows of his presence stretching across the room. "Truth," he repeated. "Is that all? You dare to speak the truth about the world, about me, and yet you hide behind excuses." Arya swallowed, trying to steady herself. "I didn't hide," she whispered. I was careful with who I trusted, but I thought my words were safe. I never thought they could reach you." A small smile tugged at Cale's lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Safe," he said softly, almost like a question. "Nothing is safe in this kingdom, Arya. Words, thoughts, even intentions can have consequences." She looked down at her hands, feeling suddenly very small in the presence of the king. I understand." "Do you?" Cale's voice dropped, almost a whisper, and he came closer, so close that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Because you should. Every word, every glance, every hesitation, it matters, especially when it reaches someone like me." Her heart hammered painfully against her chest. She felt the tension in the room tighten, wrapping around her like a heavy cloak. Cale's gaze was unwavering, and she realized something terrifying and thrilling. He was not just curious, he was testing her, seeing if she would break under the weight of his attention. I didn't mean to offend," she said softly, almost inaudible. "I respect you, King Cale." He lifted a hand, stopping her words before they could escape. "Respect. Yes, I see that. And yet there is something more. Fear, perhaps, curiosity. Something in you that refuses to bow completely, that reaches beyond what is expected of an Omega. Am I right?" Her breath caught. How could he see that? How could he know the thoughts she kept locked even from herself? "You see much," she whispered. Cale moved to the fireplace, placing the letter on the mantel. He leaned against it, arms crossed, his posture both commanding and relaxed. "I do, and I am curious. Curious about you, about your mind, about your courage, about what drives you to write words that could bring you harm." Arya felt her cheeks flush. Courage. She had never thought of herself as courageous. She had always tried to survive quietly, avoid drawing attention, blend into the shadows. But here was the king, standing before her, declaring that her small act of honesty had caught his notice. Why are you curious about me?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and longing. Cale's eyes softened, almost imperceptibly, and he stepped closer, so close that she could see the faint flicker of emotion in his dark gaze. "Because you are different. You do not bend entirely to the world, and you do not bend entirely to me. And yet, you are bound by forces you cannot fully understand. I see that in you, and it intrigues me." Her heart thumped wildly. Every instinct screamed at her to step back, to hide, to flee. But a strange, undeniable pull kept her rooted. She wanted to ask him why he had come to her manor at this hour, why he had not punished her for such a bold mistake. But the words lodged in her throat. Cale studied her quietly, as if reading her thoughts directly. Then he moved slightly closer, just enough that the air between them seemed to shimmer with tension. "I am not here to punish you, Arya," he said. "Not tonight. Not yet. But you must understand, the consequences of your words are real. And they could change everything for you, for me, for the kingdom." She nodded slowly, trying to understand. The weight of his presence pressed down on her, but it was not unbearable. It was intense, powerful. like standing at the edge of a cliff, afraid to fall yet unable to turn away. "Tell me," Kale said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "why you wrote what you wrote, every word, every thought. I want to hear it from you, honestly." Arya took a shaky breath. Her hands were cold, but she held them together in her lap. I wrote what I felt," she said finally. "About the world. About the way power rules and how people like me, Omegas, are always hidden, always silenced. I wrote about how I wished I could be seen, truly seen. And about you. About the way you carry yourself, the way people fear you, respect you, and yet I wondered if beneath it all you feel lonely too." Kale's eyes darkened. A flicker of something, anger, longing, pain, crossed his features. She could not tell which. But she continued, her voice gaining strength. "I did not mean to offend," she said softly. "I only wanted to speak honestly, to feel free in my own thoughts. I never thought anyone like you would read them." Kale stepped back slightly, pacing near the window. "You are bold, little Omega," he murmured. "You are fearless in ways few are, and foolish perhaps, but there is honesty in your words. That honesty is rare." Arya's chest tightened. His words, soft yet full of weight, struck something deep within her. She felt exposed and understood at the same time. A dangerous mix of fear and fascination churned inside her. "Do you regret it?" Kale asked suddenly, his voice low, almost threatening. I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me, yes, part of me is terrified. But part of me is relieved that someone will know the truth, even if it is you." Kale stopped pacing. He turned fully toward her, the moonlight glinting off the edges of his cloak. He was silent for a long moment, studying her. Then he spoke, his voice softer than before but still filled with authority. "You have captured my attention, Arya," he said. "And attention from me is not a small thing. It comes with consequences, danger, responsibility, and yet I cannot ignore it." Her heart raced. She had expected anger, punishment, dismissal, anything but this quiet intensity that seemed to pull at her soul. "Tonight," Kale continued, moving closer again, "you will not be left alone. I will remain here, not to frighten you, not to harm you, but to understand you, to learn what drives you, what makes you who you are." Arya swallowed, her voice barely a whisper. Why me?" Kale's gaze softened ever so slightly. "Because you are unlike anyone I have known. Because your courage, your honesty is dangerous, yes, but it is also compelling. And because, little Omega, you may be the one who can change me." She felt her breath catch in her throat. Change him. How could she, an Omega, small and untrained in the ways of the court and kingdom, change a king? And yet, the words stirred something deep inside her, a warmth she had never felt before. The night stretched on, heavy with unspoken questions and possibilities. Outside, the wind moaned through the trees, carrying with it a sense of foreboding. Arya realized that this night, the night the king came to her door, was only the beginning. She did not know what the future held, but she felt, with a clarity that frightened her, that nothing would ever be the same. Kale finally moved to the mantel, picking up the letter again. He held it between his fingers, reading her words one last time. Then he looked back at her, his gaze sharp yet strangely gentle. "Sleep now," he said, his voice low and commanding. "Tomorrow we will speak again. But remember this, Arya, honesty has consequences, and curiosity can be dangerous." Arya nodded, feeling both relief and tension. As he left the room, closing the door behind him, she sank into a chair, her heart still racing. She had survived the first encounter, but she knew deep down that this was far from over. The candle flickered, casting shadows across the room, and outside the moon shone down, illuminating the path of a story that had only just begun. And in the quiet, Arya realized that she had glimpsed the first threads of something that could change not only her life, but the fate of the kingdom itself. The first light of dawn had yet to touch the kingdom when Arya awoke to a soft knocking at her chamber door. Her heart skipped a beat. She had barely slept, her mind tangled in the events of the previous night. King Kale had stayed, silently observing, asking questions that reached into her thoughts, drawing truths from her she hadn't even dared voice before. Now there was a knocking, deliberate, steady, insistent. She froze, listening. The sound came again, slow and purposeful. Arya, Kale's voice murmured through the door. "We must leave now." Her breath caught. "Leave? Where? Why?" She opened the door cautiously, peeking out into the dim corridor. Kale stood there, cloak flowing, eyes scanning the empty halls. His presence, always commanding, now carried an urgency she had never seen before. "Why?" she asked, voice trembling. "Danger," he said simply, his tone leaving no room for argument. "A threat approaches the manor. I received word before arriving last night, but it is now unavoidable. We must go quietly." Arya's heart raced. Threat. She had never imagined that a single letter could bring peril into her home. But looking at Kale, his eyes sharp and alert, she understood this was no ordinary danger. It was something that could reach beyond walls and guards, something tied to the power of the crown itself. "Where are we going?" she asked, trying to steady her voice. "Somewhere safe," he replied, motioning for her to follow. "But you must trust me completely, not just tonight but in the nights to come." She nodded, swallowing her fear. The trust was hard, nearly impossible, yet the calm strength in his voice drew her forward. Together, they moved through the corridors, silent as shadows. Kale's hand brushed hers once as he guided her, and a warmth spread through her chest she could not explain. Outside, the wind howled through the trees. The manor's gates were locked tight, but Kale did not stop. He led her into the forest that bordered the estate, the moonlight cutting through the thick mist in silver beams. The trees twisted into strange shapes, their branches like dark fingers reaching toward the sky. "You must stay close," Kale whispered, his hand now lightly brushing her elbow. "Do not let fear control you. I will protect you, but you must not falter." Arya nodded, gripping her cloak tightly. The forest seemed alive, shadows shifting as if watching their every movement. She had never been in such a place at night, the air heavy with magic and secrets. As they moved deeper into the forest, Kale's gaze never left the shadows ahead. "We are not alone," he said quietly. "Something waits for us, something old and dangerous. Be ready." Her pulse quickened. She tried to match his stride, but the fear made her legs heavy. Still, there was a thrill, a strange exhilaration that coursed through her veins. Being near him like this, seeing him in motion, his every decision precise, every glance sharp and alert, made her heart pound. She had never imagined that danger could feel so alive. Suddenly, a rustle in the underbrush made her jump. Kale's hand shot out, gripping her arm and pulling her behind him. His presence was solid, grounding, and she realized for the first time how much power and skill he possessed, not just as a ruler but as a protector. From the shadows, a figure emerged, not human but something ethereal, cloaked in a mist that seemed to breathe. Its eyes glowed faintly, pale and cold. Arya froze, unable to look away. "Do not move," Kale whispered, placing himself between her and the figure. "It is drawn to fear, to doubt. Do not give it either." The figure advanced, gliding over the forest floor without sound. Arya's instincts screamed for her to run, to hide, to flee, but Kale's presence held her rooted. His hand rested lightly on her shoulder, steadying her trembling body. "Focus," he murmured. "Do not fear it. Fear makes it stronger." Arya closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. Slowly, she felt the panic within her ease, replaced by determination. She would not let fear control her. She would not let this shadow harm them. The figure hesitated, as if sensing the change. Kale's eyes narrowed. "It is testing you," he said. "Both of us, your courage and mine." Arya opened her eyes, staring at the being. She felt a strange pull, part fear, part fascination. She realized that it mirrored her own uncertainty, her own doubts, yet also her strength. Carefully, she stepped forward, not speaking but letting her presence, her courage, and her honesty shine through. The shadow shivered, then slowly receded, dissolving into the mist. Kale exhaled softly, lowering his hand from her shoulder. "Well done," he said quietly. Few have the courage to face such things without faltering. Her heart was still racing, but she felt a surge of pride. I didn't know I could, she whispered. Kale's gaze softened, and for a moment the hardness of the Alpha King melted away. You are stronger than you know, Arya, stronger than you realize. The forest seemed to exhale, the mist thinning as moonlight touched the ground. Arya realized how close she had been to fear, and yet how close she had also been to something extraordinary, something she could not yet name. They continued through the forest in silence. Kale's hand brushed hers occasionally, subtle, intentional, grounding her. The danger had passed for now, but the tension between them remained, electric, impossible to ignore. After what felt like hours, they emerged into a small clearing. Moonlight bathed the area, revealing a hidden stream and a cluster of ancient stones. Kale motioned for her to sit on one of the stones. You are safe here, he said, for now. He sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. Arya's heart fluttered. She wanted to speak, to ask questions, but words seemed small compared to the enormity of the night. Finally, she found her voice. Why are you helping me? Why risk yourself? Kale's eyes were distant, thoughtful. Because, he said slowly, I do not often meet someone who moves me, challenges me without intending to. You have done both, and I need to understand it. Her cheeks flushed. Me, I'm just an Omega. I'm not powerful like you. He turned to face her, his gaze intense. Power is not only strength of arms or command of men. True power lies in courage, honesty, and the will to act when fear threatens to consume you. You have all of these, Arya. You may not see it yet, but I do. The warmth of his words, the weight of his gaze, made her chest tighten. She realized how little she had understood herself until this night, how much she had hidden, how much she had doubted her own worth. And yet here was someone, the most powerful man in the kingdom, recognizing her value, honoring her courage. A silence fell between them, comfortable yet charged with unspoken thoughts. The forest whispered around them, the wind carrying the scent of moss and wet earth, the distant call of night birds. Arya felt an ache deep inside, a longing she could not name, a connection she had never expected. Kale, she whispered finally, hesitant, if this danger returns, if it comes for us, what will we do? He studied her, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke softly but with absolute certainty. We will face it together. Whatever comes, we will face it side by side. The words, simple yet powerful, struck her heart. Side by side. She had never imagined such a bond, such trust. And yet, hearing it from him, feeling the sincerity in his voice, made her pulse quicken and her spirit soar. For a long moment, neither moved. The tension between them was palpable, a delicate thread stretched between fear and fascination, trust and longing. Arya wanted to speak, to ask the questions that burned in her mind, but the words failed her. Kale reached out, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered near her cheek, warm and steady. She swallowed, aware of the electricity that seemed to hum in the space between them. You have changed something in me tonight, he said quietly, almost to himself. Something I did not think could be changed. And I do not yet know what it means, but I will find out. Arya's heart thudded painfully. She had expected danger, uncertainty, fear, but not this. Not this quiet intensity, this electric connection, this strange feeling that her life had been irrevocably altered in a single night. The wind rustled through the trees, and somewhere in the distance, a shadow shifted, reminding them both that the night was far from over. Danger would return. The kingdom still held secrets, conspiracies, and unseen threats. And yet in this moment, Arya and Kale sat together, side by side, bound by courage, trust, and a strange, growing understanding. As dawn's first light touched the horizon, Arya realized something she had never known before. She was no longer the same Omega who had sent a careless letter. She had faced danger, fear, and the unknown, and survived. And in the process, she had touched something powerful, something beyond understanding in the king of the realm himself. And in that quiet clearing, with moonlight fading and dawn approaching, Arya understood that her life, her heart, and her destiny were now entwined with his, forever changed, forever bound, and yet only beginning. The castle loomed before them like a sleeping giant, its towers shadowed against the morning sky. Arya and Kale rode silently through the misty streets of the capital, the tension of the past nights heavy in their hearts. The forest behind them had offered temporary refuge, but the kingdom itself held the true dangers, the kind that whispered in court halls, that lurked behind gilded doors, and that could shift the balance of power in an instant. Kale's hand rested lightly on the reins of his horse, but his eyes never left Arya. "Do you understand what awaits us inside?" he asked quietly. Arya nodded, though fear curled in her stomach. "I think so, but I will face it. I will face it with you." His gaze softened, and for the briefest moment, the stern Alpha King vanished, leaving only a man who trusted her enough to speak his truth. "Good," he said. "You must, because the dangers inside these walls are not only threats to you, but to the very balance of this kingdom." They dismounted at the castle gates, moving carefully through the guards who, upon seeing Kale, bowed their heads in respect. Yet even respect could not mask the tension that hummed in the air. Something in the castle had shifted during the night. Arya could feel it in the cold stone beneath her feet, in the flickering torches, in the silence of the halls. "Stay close," Kale whispered. His hand brushed hers, light but grounding. She felt a shiver of warmth, even as fear threatened to overwhelm her. They entered the throne room, its golden walls gleaming in the morning light. But the grandeur could not hide the unease. Courtiers and advisors whispered in corners, their eyes darting nervously. At the far end of the hall, a group of shadowed figures stood silently, their faces hidden beneath hoods. Kale's jaw tightened. "They've grown bold," he murmured, "and they are not ordinary courtiers. They seek to undermine the crown itself." Arya's pulse quickened. She had sensed danger in the forest, in the shadows, and now it had followed them into the heart of the kingdom. Yet standing beside Kale, she felt a strange courage. Together, they could face whatever came. The leader of the hooded figures stepped forward, lowering his hood to reveal a pale, angular face. "Your Majesty," he said, voice smooth and dangerous, "we know of your interest in the Omega who dares to speak freely. That is troubling." Kale's eyes narrowed. "Speak clearly or leave. I will not tolerate threats in my throne room." The man smiled faintly. "We are not here to threaten King Kale yet, but know this. The presence of an Omega with influence in your inner circle disrupts the order of things. It cannot continue." Arya's heart raced. Influence, inner circle. The words were both frightening and empowering. Somehow her honesty, her courage, had placed her at the center of a storm she had never imagined. Kale's hand brushed hers again, a silent reminder that she was not alone. "Do they know what they are dealing with?" he asked softly. She shook her head. "No, not yet. They do not know who I am or what I can do." Kale's gaze met hers, intense and unwavering. "Then we shall show them, but you must trust me completely. There will be no hesitation." "No doubt, only courage." Arya nodded, her fear mingling with determination. She had survived the forest, faced shadows and dangers unknown, and had grown stronger because of it. Now, in the heart of the kingdom, she would prove herself once more. The tension in the room thickened as the hooded figures moved forward. Kale stepped in front of her, his presence a shield and a weapon at once. "You will not harm her," he said, his voice ringing with authority, "or you will face consequences that reach far beyond this hall." The man tilted his head, considering him. "You are bold, King, but courage without strategy is folly." Kale's lips curved in a small, dangerous smile. "And yet strategy without courage accomplishes nothing. You underestimate the bond between those who trust one another. You underestimate the power of honesty and loyalty." Arya felt a surge of warmth at his words. He was speaking of her, and she realized that she had become more than she had ever imagined. She was not just an Omega who sent a careless letter. She was someone who had faced danger, who had spoken truth, and who had earned the respect of the most powerful man in the kingdom. The leader of the group hesitated, then stepped back. "Very well," he said, his tone cautious. "But know this, shadows linger and not all threats are seen. You cannot protect her forever." Kale's eyes darkened. "Perhaps not, but tonight she stands beside me, and together we are stronger than any shadow that dares approach." The figures left the hall, disappearing as silently as they had arrived. The courtiers breathed easier, though whispers of awe and curiosity followed Kale and Arya. The danger had passed for now, but Arya knew deep in her heart that it would return. Kale turned to her, his expression unreadable yet softer than before. "You have done well, Arya," he said quietly. "Your courage, your honesty, it has changed more than the minds of those men. It has changed me." Her heart tightened. "Changed you?" she whispered. "Yes," he replied, stepping closer. The warmth of his presence enveloped her, the intensity of his gaze holding her in place. "I have ruled with strength and fear for many years, but you remind me of something I had forgotten. That power is not only in command or dominance, but in trust, honesty, and the bonds we choose to forge." Arya felt a tear slip down her cheek, not of fear, not of sadness, but of recognition. For the first time she realized that the king, powerful as he was human too, capable of change, of vulnerability, of love. "Kale," she whispered, reaching for his hand. I don't know what will happen next, but I know I want to face it with you." He took her hand gently, the touch warm and steadying. "And you shall, Arya. Whatever comes, we face it together. Not as ruler and subject, not as Alpha and Omega, but as two people who have chosen each other." The weight of his words settled over her like sunlight, illuminating her heart. She felt something she had never known, belonging, trust, and a deep, abiding courage. Together they left the hall, walking through the corridors of the castle, their hands intertwined. The morning sun spilled through the windows, painting the stone floors gold. The kingdom was waking, the world moving forward, but within the castle walls, something new had begun, something stronger, deeper, and unbreakable. Days passed, and with each day, Arya grew more confident in herself and in her bond with Kale. She learned to navigate the subtle currents of court intrigue, to speak her mind with wisdom, and to face challenges with calm determination. And Kale softened in ways he had never imagined. His presence no longer only commanded fear or respect. He began to trust, to laugh, to share burdens, and to show her glimpses of the man beneath the crown. The bond between them deepened, tempered by shared danger and tempered by mutual respect. They learned from each other, Kale teaching her strategy and patience, Arya teaching him vulnerability and empathy. Together, they became a force unlike any the kingdom had seen before. And then, one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of crimson and gold, Kale led Arya to the highest tower of the castle. They stood side by side, overlooking the kingdom. The wind whispered around them, carrying the scent of distant forests and the faint promise of magic. "You have changed me, Arya," Kale said softly, his voice barely above the wind. "You have reminded me that true strength lies not in fear or control, but in trust and courage. And in love, yes, even in love." Arya turned to him, her heart full. "And you have changed me," she replied. "You have shown me that courage can grow, even in fear, that honesty can be powerful, even against the strongest shadows." Kale reached for her hand, lifting it gently to his lips. "Then we are bound, are we not?" he asked, his dark eyes searching hers. "Yes," she whispered, "bound by choice, by courage, by trust." They stood together as the first stars appeared, the kingdom below peaceful for now, though aware that challenges would always come. But they knew this. They would face the future together, side by side, heart to heart, their bond stronger than any shadow, stronger than fear, stronger than power itself. And in that quiet, eternal moment, Arya and Kale realized the truth they had discovered over the nights of danger and discovery. Love is not weakness, honesty is not folly, and courage is the greatest power of all. For the kingdom, the Alpha and the Omega, nothing would ever be the same again, and they would face whatever came together.